You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to VAC Roundtable number 90. Today we have a special guest today, which is a dear friend as well as a compatriot. I have basically worked with Aaron Smith for close to a decade. I was on the board of the National Cannabis Industry Association, and we finally had the time to sit down and have this discussion with him. And of course, we take these opportunities to educate ourselves, our veterans, and our community, because as you know, we are a very rich tapestry. And the National Cannabis Industry Association is a deep part and a very big thread through this. We've made that a case to do so. I was fortunate to be on the board with Aaron for the National Cannabis Industry Association from 2010 to 2020. And then I stepped away to let others kind of take the mantle forward, because I think, well, I did about as much as I could do per se, and it was time for others to, step up and make it happen. So we're basically going to jump right into it with Aaron Smith. So first up, thank you for joining us tonight as we now go to our speaker view. So right out the gate, this is kind of a multi-textured question because, how did you originally come to cannabis is one, of course, of, how did you originally hear about it? When did you first get turned on? And the most important is, when did you realize it was going to be your life's work?
Well, thank you for having me. It's always great to be with you, Etienne, and Nate, and this amazing organization. I thank the veterans for your service to the country and for your service to this movement as well. And I know it's hard to advocate for yourself at in the political halls of power, and sometimes you shouldn't have to do it, but you do. To answer your question, yeah, I've been involved in cannabis reform my whole adult life. I started in college. I got busted for very small amount of cannabis, but jerked around for that from the police. I was very much a ideologically libertarian kind of idealist in my early 20s and late teens, and I actually came across a mutual friend of ours, Chris Conrad, and Mickey Norris were the first people that introduced me to the cannabis movement. I think it was a book signing in the town of Sebastopol, California, I think, out in Sonoma County, where I'm from. And that's kind of when I discovered that there was this whole, movement underway, and I started attending normal conferences and met some folks. And it was in 2010 when I was really fortunate enough to make it a career. I met the Marijuana Policy Project, some of the leadership there at the time. I was running they were looking for somebody in California to do their political work, and I wrote a grant and got awarded that, and the rest was history. I started doing work for medical cannabis in California, and then kind of shifted into adult use advocacy. And there was Proposition 19, which was on the ballot in 2010. Fortunately, it didn't pass that till a little later, but I was involved in that. And then in 2010, also created NCIA because the co-founder, the late great Steve Fox, and I saw the need to provide the industry a voice because we were, that's the emerging industry didn't have a voice, and we kind of filled that spot and have grown to where we are today. And it's an honor.
Yes, sir. And it's been an honor to work alongside you and also see the growth of the Cannabis Industry Association itself, because it was definitely a risk when starting off because of how young the movement, at least the industry, was. But the key insight is you also saw the ancillary businesses, not just the cannabis businesses, but there's lots of other businesses that touch specifically. And you know that if you have a bank account or not, especially if you have a bank account in this industry still. So we'll go on to our next question, which will be Council Member Landau. Nate, you're up.
Hey, Aaron, it's always good to see you. I've seen you in the nation's capital and a bunch of cities in California, so it's always a pleasure to meet with you. You always have great insights. And my question to you is, how has the national conversation around cannabis evolved since you founded NCIA, and where do you see the most significant shifts still needed, especially at the federal level? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Always good to be with you too. It's shifted dramatically. When you look at the progress that has been made, it's pretty significant compared to almost any other movement in the country. And when I started NCIA, there were, I think, two members of Congress that were willing to support cannabis reform at the time. It was Ron Paul, a libertarian, Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul's father, libertarian from Texas, and Barney Frank from Massachusetts. I think those were the two members of Congress that were willing to say that they supported legalization. And you fast forward to today, and at that time it was like we couldn't even get meetings really to talk about the issue in Congress. And when we did, it was just a struggle to be taken seriously. Like there was a lot of laughing and snickering and eye rolling. And fast forward to today, I think that it's safe to say we probably have a majority of Congress or at least on the House side, that supports legalization, even this current Republican-controlled Congress, because just about almost every Democratic member supports legalization, save but maybe one or two, and a good number of Republicans as well. And we're starting to find that the issue is no longer. We have the current president has supported the initiative in Florida that he said he voted for, has said that he supports banking reform, he supports rescheduling. The previous president also supported, of the different party, of course, supported this. So we're at this point now where it's like all of the politicians are clamoring to give this issue lip service, but we still haven't gotten the prize, which is national legalization, federal reform. And the impediment to that progress, though, is less about the political controversy surrounding cannabis and more about just general political dysfunction in this country that every movement is a victim of and frustrated. Every American probably who's paying attention is frustrated by.
Yes, needless to say, frustrated is a word that rings true, I think, for a lot of us, considering the work that we've definitely put in with so little outcome, right? Regardless, we'll move on to our next question, which is veterans have often been powerful advocates for medical cannabis access. How has the NCIA worked with veterans over the years, and what more can be done to elevate their voice in policy making?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that veterans have been the tip of the spear, so to speak, on this issue and many others, because it's very difficult, I think, for any reasonable person in this country to say or think that somebody who who sacrificed their health and well-being for the country, whether it be PTSD or other maladies, somebody who did that should have every right to treat themselves in any way that works for them under their doctor's care. I mean, nobody at this point. I don't think they poll on this issue because it's probably in the 99 somewhat percent range of Americans that believe that. It's so, and that's why I think that we're seeing so much progress on psychedelics, for example. Not an issue NCIA works on, but I think it's an adjacent issue, and there's a lot of great work happening in that movement as well. That's being led by veterans, and in terms of how we've worked together, it's making sure veterans have done a great job at elevating this issue into the national conversation because of what I just outlined. And many elected officials will not listen to a cannabis business, but will listen to an organization like yours because because of the values that they have around, and I'm talking about Republicans for the most part. And so that's one way we've always kind of collaborated on messaging. And we also have done lobby days. I don't know how many times we've done that, but maybe Etienne and Mike and Nate have all been to the lobby days events that we've done, which is an opportunity to come to DC, tell your story, and about, for us, it's the industry, and how we're creating jobs, paying taxes, contributing to the local economies and communities, to the power brokers in Washington, and to really put a face on this industry. And I love the way that we've worked together. I hope we can continue to do that in the future through lobby days. Come out to DC. It's usually around May. We don't have next year's scheduled yet, but it'll probably be in the same time frame. And join NCIA, join alongside with NCIA to show, this is what this movement really looks like.
And that's one of the things that I credit the NCAA of doing is it takes people right off the street, trains you how to actually go to your representative or senator's offices, not just yours. You go to multiple ones. So you travel with a group of people, and then you go in and you tell your story. I want to thank Aaron and the NCIA because they allowed the Veterans Action Council to numerous lobby days in the past. In 22 and 23, we had, or we were tasked by YOLA going specifically at the Veterans Affairs and Armed Services Committees, as well as the Judicial Committee, because those were meetings that, as you were stating, because they were Republican and Republican heavy, we were able to go in and have the tough conversations where regular cannabis entrepreneurs would not necessarily be heard as seriously. Don't get me wrong, we got our own share of giggles and a meeting with fellows as well. We weren't completely met with full belief. However, the support of such as Mast's office and others have been very helpful and supportive. And we hope to see more in the future from the Cannabis Caucus, because as we know, that is rife with challenges and even going to be harder because given the current state of the political affairs, our issue unfortunately becomes pushed down the line further and further as more of our freedoms and liberties get trampled upon. So thank you for your years of service as well to the NCIA, as well as your unwavering support for us, as well as when I left the NCIA, I asked, and I hope that in the future, if there's awards given out, they're given in honorary names of Jack Herrera, Dr. Todd McCrea, Dennis Perrone, and others who were veteran leaders in this movement who left lasting impressions and changes. Next up will be Michael Crowitz with the next question. Councilmember Crowitz.
Thanks, Etienne. It's so great to see Aaron. Thanks so much for joining us. We've been really looking forward to having this conversation. Before I ask this question, I'll preface it by saying that Veterans Action Council, we did quite a bit of research into the industry and how it would apply to individual veterans trying to enter into the business sphere. And what we found was, even if you tried to set up a program where you get millions of dollars off a business license or whatever, you still wind up in a situation that it's hard to apply the various mechanisms of usual business to what you're trying to do. It's hard to get loans. It's hard to find different kinds of backing in intellectual space. So anyway, it just was really a challenge. And in that light, the question is, access to financial services remains one of the most pressing issues for cannabis entrepreneurs. What's your take on the future of cannabis reform, and how can NCIA help ensure veterans and equity-owned businesses aren't left behind?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's great to see you too, Mike. And well, I guess I could speak to the Safe Banking Act because that's been a centerpiece legislation for NCIA since we founded the organization, and it's probably uh, the most bipartisan bill in Washington. And the Safe Banking Act, what it would do, hasn't been introduced yet this Congress, but will be fairly imminently. What that legislation does is it just normalizes financial services for the industry, allows banks to do business with the industry without fear of sanctions from the Department of Treasury or running afoul of money laundering laws. And what we need to do is we need to pass this legislation. It's very incremental, which is why it has the strong support that it has on the Republican side, because it doesn't legalize cannabis. It doesn't really change anything for a state that doesn't have legal cannabis. It only addresses the banking issue. And so, the banking issue, because of the challenges you outlined, disproportionately impacts small businesses, veteran-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. The bigger MSOs, they have access to private capital. They have the ability to raise money in a way that the small businesses just can't without your lines of credit and bank loans. So the Safe Banking Act would open up lines of credit, bank loans, those sorts of services to the industry. There's also legislation that we've worked on in the past that would specifically open up SBA lending programs for cannabis. Nadia Velasquez on the House side has introduced that in previous years. So still something to work on for this Congress because, again, that's the small businesses right now being federally illegal do not have access to the SBA programs. Even ancillary businesses, in many cases, have troubles with banking and certainly SBA. And another issue that you'll see coming from us soon that we're working on is relief from 280E retroactively, because we're working on rescheduling, which I think we can probably talk about now, in the future of this conversation, which would remove the burden of 280E if we move cannabis from Schedule 1 to 3. But what happens to legacy businesses like Berkeley Patients Group and groups that, businesses that have been around for decades that have this back tax liability unfairly, a tax that should never have been in place in the first place? And so we're working with allies in Congress to introduce a bill that would provide some retroactive relief and I think this impacts the small businesses disproportionately too, because it's a lot easier to carry that tax burden if you're a giant, multi-state enterprise compared to a small business. And it's a social equity issue because we have these states that have social equity programs that are putting veterans ahead, or people, businesses of color, business owners of color ahead of the line, which is a great thing. But it's kind of doesn't serve you very well to be first in this industry if that just means that you're going to get in before 280E is fixed. So those are kind of the three big policy areas that we're working on the financial services front, and it all except for the rescheduling requires congressional action, which is a challenge these days.
Absolutely. Michael Krawitz, you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, I just had a quick follow-up. We in the Veterans Action Council, because of the fact that we're working nationally and internationally, we get sort of a holistic view of the opposition to marijuana. And I just want to point this out and see what your comment, if any, if your thoughts on this. But for example, Kevin Sabet's organization, it's Smart Approaches to Marijuana. rails against big tobacco-like cannabis or big cannabis.
Mhm.
And the irony is, of course, that in their actions, they again and again stop reforms like you just described, which would actually favor small businesses. Now, I'm not trying to be a conspiracist, although, there's plenty of meat there if you wanted to go there as to why they seem to be supporting big industry while railing against it. But nonetheless, I mean, it's this ironic sort of world that we're living in, rhetorically. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that if you wanted to.
It is, yeah, it is ironic, and I mean, some of it is there is a conspiracy afoot in some regards, and sometimes it's just complete incompetence, on government incompetence. Because the real thing, the real paradox here with the banking situation is that it actually discourages legal businesses from reporting where their money came from, because if an illegal drug dealer doesn't go into a bank and say, I'm a drug dealer, open an account. An illegal drug dealer just opens an account, says there's something else, a laundromat or whatever, and they have no problem. And so as far as Project Sam, yeah, I mean they're funded by the treatment industry, the treatment industrial complex, which makes its money from for arresting people for cannabis and forcing them into treatment they probably don't need. I mean, they're funded by several sources and pharma, but treatment industry is a big one. And their goal is to just keep prohibition in place, and they see something like Safe Banking Act as Campbell's nose under the tent or something like that, because it'll be the first domino to fall, I suppose, is probably the way they see that. And it's pretty unfortunate because they're creating it's not just about access to lending and capital for your business. It's a public safety disaster because you have businesses that can't take credit cards, and that means there's a lot of cash in these businesses. The criminal knows that that's the case, and so there's robberies and sometimes violence in our industry that otherwise would be making the community safer in every other way. The cannabis industry is improving public safety, except around that cash heavy side of the business, which is all a manufactured problem by federal government.
And it's a real one. And I just to give you an understanding, people, I've been kicked out. My business, Berkeley Patients Group, has been kicked out of 39 banks now in 25 years, 26 years now. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's how absolutely perilous it is. Yeah, I actually sat down one day and counted them, and actually came to that number. And that's to say it's been a frustration because of not only that it's done, it's how it's done. It's done very maliciously, like the day before payroll is due, right? And you're supposed to have your money in the bank account ready for that, and they send you the check for your entire amount and saying go away. That's happened numerous times, and to say that is a challenge to deal with is needless to say, it's been a fucking challenge to deal with across the board. So
Yeah. I mean, even a nonprofit association like ours has lost bank accounts. It's crazy.
correct. And
Yeah.
I know ancillary businesses who don't even touch cannabis, a genetics company, a CRISPR technology companies, and others. I mean, we just saw a whole bunch of businesses that won at the California State Fair get completely wiped off of Instagram and social media, so
Yeah.
it's
If-
very much still a problem due to the scheduling of where cannabis is, and we were hoping to see descheduling be moving along, but unfortunately we're at a stagnation point. So yeah, we hope to see that move shortly, or at least any word in DC on that?
Well, on Monday, the Senate is confirming the DEA administrator Cole. It's expected to be confirmed. So that kind of is the first step that needs to happen in order to get the rescheduling process back on track. And so for those who don't know, the Biden administration began a process a few years ago that would of what they that had been leading toward a recommendation to move cannabis from Schedule 1 to 3, which is taking it from a drug like a drug like LSD and heroin and putting it in a category, alongside other like anabolic steroids, for example, ketamine. Those are Schedule 3 drugs. Other very highly controlled, yet have medical value, and that's been recognized by federal law. That process got really mucked up through a number of reasons, and it was dragged out beyond the inauguration day of President Trump, which kind of created this even further delay, because now you've got a transition in the DEA, and we only not until Monday haven't even had a DEA administrator in place. So I'm hopeful, though, that and from everything we've heard from the DEA incoming DEA administrator, is that this is a priority to at least he has not made any statement on which direction they're going to go, but that at least picking the process back up is a priority. Thankfully, the president has made very clear that he supports rescheduling and even beyond that. And one thing that's seems to hold true with this administration is all of the political appointees are bound to follow the will of the administration, the president. They kind of all walk in lockstep. So in this case, I think that's good for us, because even though Terry Cole, has a background as somebody who hates cannabis, as would almost any candidate for the DEA head would be in that position. He's reporting to a president that that is on record for doing the right thing, at least on this issue.
Well, we shall see. I mean, we really want to see. I mean, because rescheduling at least would change one of the hallmarks or one of the pillars of NCIA, which is 280E, which, of course, to most people are not aware of 280E. But as somebody who just went through a 7-year fight against the IRS, it is very expensive, not very fun, and I highly don't recommend it. But you don't really get a choice, because the IRS comes at you. Whereas if we're able to get it out of Schedule 1 or 2, then the 280E would naturally go away. So that's the hope. So next up will be Councilmember Landau. You're with our next question.
Hey, Aaron, looking back at your 15 years of leading NCIA, what do you consider your proudest accomplishment, and what was the biggest challenge you had to overcome during that time? Thank you.
That's a good question. It's hard to point to one thing, but as I said before, this is a long game, and just the fact that we're in a place right now where the sitting president and the previous president from the other party both support cannabis rescheduling and some level of federal reform it's a huge accomplishment for not just NCIA, but for this movement to even be in this position that we're in right now. And it was a great, I'm very proud that NCIA was the only association that was tapped to represent the industry in the DEA's rescheduling hearings, which we hope to see get back on track later this year. As far as the challenge, I think the challenge is that this industry, for whatever reason, is not as politically active as one would think it should be, considering people who work in this industry are facing risk of arrest, prosecution, having all of their properties seized because this is a federally illegal product. Yet the industry puts very little money into cannabis reform, and so that's a huge challenge, and it's something I'm very worried about as we look forward. Is that the industry is taking its foot off the gas right now, and organizations like ours are downsizing. There's less lobbyists. There's less lobbyists in Sacramento. There's less lobbyists in DC working on this issue, when at a time when there should be more, and we should be putting more resources into political reform. And if somebody starts a business in cannabis, for example, they invest sometimes their whole life savings into a business that is federally illegal, but then don't even put a dime into the work to change that federal law. They just so I would see that as not even an investment in their business. It's like a gamble. It's like, I'm going to start a business and gamble on it, NCIA's succeeding so that I can then make money. And it's crazy to think that way. And that's something that's a challenge. And I think that any this industry is very new, but as the industry matures, I hope to see more investment in reform. Even after cannabis is legal, the industry needs to be politically engaged, and just as every other industry is.
Well, they should, and many of us tried to be examples, but unfortunately, the examples weren't followed once the not-for-profit status was taken away and it became kind of for-profit, unfortunately, which I don't need to explain to you, necessarily all too well. But that goes into our next question. The NCIA has long advocated for a fair and inclusive cannabis industry. What are the most effective strategies you've seen for increasing access and ownership for historically marginalized groups, including veterans?
Good question. So, we see a patchwork of state laws and in some cases city ordinances that do their best. I think that they're all well-intentioned and some work better than others at social equity programs that provide kind of put marginalized communities in front of the line, particularly those who, and when it comes to licensing for cannabis, particularly those minority communities that were most impacted by the war on drugs. And although those programs, I support the concept of those programs and the effort there, many times it seems it's not the best strategy, in my opinion. I think that just having a freer market kind of program where your taxes are low, barriers to entry are low across the board tends to do better at providing just access for anybody to be able to get into the industry. And it's you shouldn't have to be a millionaire in order to open a cannabis business, and that's and there shouldn't have to be these programs that circumvent a system that is already not working to because of the capital requirements and such. And so I think as regulators across the country and policymakers, I guess more importantly in the states that care about helping marginalized communities, they also need to look at things like, I think like Etienne mentioned, the taxes in California. That's making it very near impossible to succeed in a cannabis business regardless of who you are. And that's hurting marginalized communities even more, just disproportionately. And it's also just we have to keep in mind that there is this decades and decades of an underground market, particularly in California, but also just across the country. And if we want to eliminate illegal cannabis and create a system that replaces that criminal market, we have to provide for laws that make it easy to access the legal market. Otherwise, people will continue to produce and sell cannabis in the criminal one.
Right on. Next up will be Councilmember Mike Davis.
Yeah. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for joining us.
Mike.
Yeah. From your vantage point at the intersection of policy and industry, what signals, if any, are you seeing from Capitol Hill that might suggest meaningful movement or obstacles ahead, maybe for veterans and medical access? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really encouraged by the progress that seems to be being made around psychedelic medicine for veterans as well as cannabis. You've got the VA administrator Collins, who has, I think, evolved on the issue. I think he voted against cannabis. He voted against legislation that would have allowed VA doctors to recommend cannabis, but then when he was in Congress, and we'd worked with him in his office over the years when he was in Congress. And toward the end of his tenure in Congress, he actually called out, he actually became a pretty vocal proponent for reforms. So he kind of made an evolution there. I don't think he's on record around veteran since taking the role of the head of the VA, discussed marijuana, but we've seen now in both versions of a budget on the House side and the Senate side, there's legislative language that would allow VA doctors to talk about cannabis with their patients openly, at least in states that have medical cannabis programs. And so that gives me a lot of hope that and also just knowing the landscape in Congress, and I think I said at the beginning here, this is an issue that even the staunchest of prohibitionists are not coming out and saying, you know what, veterans shouldn't have access. It's that is such a third rail politically that even, we talked about Project Sam and their efforts. I don't think I've ever actually seen them publicly say veterans and doc should not be able to talk to their doctors about cannabis. Like it's just not it's a political non-starter. And so I'm hopeful. I think also having Kennedy at the HHS is probably helpful in the administration. If somebody that's already been publicly advocated for psychedelics and cannabis as medicine, and I think that I've read somewhere that he and the VA that and Doug Collins have had conversations about this. So this is it's probably, if I were to bet, the first federal reform, the next federal reform, I should say, it's probably tied between allowing veterans access and rescheduling. And I think veterans access the only reason it's tied with rescheduling is rescheduling could happen really quickly with the president picking up the phone as the other legislation is working its way through Congress, which has an inherent slow pace to it.
Right, but this is the stuff that we were lobbying 2-3 years ago about, right? And that's actually hitting it now. So this is why, again, thank you for the foresight to point us in the direction to lay that groundwork, because we knew there was political expediency, specifically because, veterans themselves are a challenge to deal with because of how we can directly call them out immediately on their bullshit. I mean, that's the, most people are easy to, go fly by and, meet and have the comfortable meeting with their senator or representative. We were not and are not afraid to have the uncomfortable conversations with them and their fellows, specifically to engage them, because we knew that if we could tie the two together, we could help propel cannabis forward. And it was, our leaderships combined that helped, and are helping to propel this. And thank you to the many other organizations and those who have gone out and done their lobbying to help make sure this is a reality. So next up will be Council Member Mike Crowitz.
Thanks, Etienne. I really revel in this question that I'm about to ask you, because it kind of understands a moment of history that we're in. The cannabis movement. I'll preface the question by saying that there's been members of our Veterans Action Council that have made a passion.
Did we lose it?
I think we got a freeze. There's storms in Virginia, unfortunately. So, as you know, you're there in or where are you in DC?
I'm actually in Denver right now.
Oh, okay.
Storms here as well.
Oh, yeah. All right. Let's give it a second. If not, I'll go into Mike's question. I'll give it just 1 second. Let's see. Sometimes it moved. Got it. Just 1 second. Oh, no, we lost him for a second. Okay, well, he'll be back. Well, I will ask a question. So, and this one was crafted by him. So, what role should the movement play moving forward? All right. And what should it avoid to be most effective and helpful, right? We don't want to step on our own toes and get in our own way. And don't get me wrong, we've inadvertently done that in the past. So we've learned from this. So as a ongoing leader, how do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that being out, never giving up, being out there, being visible, showing up at congressional and events where you've got members of Congress or state legislators talking to them, introducing yourself, talking about the issue, just constantly keeping that message and keeping that drumbeat going. But we're putting a human face on this issue. And even if you're in a state or a district where your member of Congress is fully on board, and you feel like that they already understand this issue, it's still important to continue to really show up, because there's just so much noise. If you're a member of Congress, you're dealing with 50 different things in a given day, policy areas, and there's hundreds and hundreds of lobbyists coming at you from all directions. And so it's important that we're just constantly keeping the drumbeat. And, as far as what to not do, don't sit back and just think that that change is going to happen on its own. But also don't. We need to make sure that we're not letting the enemy be the perfect be the enemy of the good, because that's something that I think a lot of movements fall prey to, where they think, well, let's just try to get this perfect piece of legislation that covers every facet of the issue and try to push that through. But what ends up happening is that nothing progresses, because there needs to be, we need a bill that appeals to both Republicans and Democrats. And that's probably not going to be the perfect bill. It's going to be a compromise bill, or something like, which I think kind of, will lead on to the next question, something like rescheduling rather than descheduling first.
Yes, absolutely. And what I wanted to say before was, we believe that the VAC pushes politicians and industry to see veterans as a policy pressure multiplier. We're not just a feel-good story. We're a strategic lever that can de-risk cannabis access politically, right? And so that's something that we will be working and continuing on. Next up will be Council Member Nate Landau. Council Member Landau.
Is the industry prepared for rescheduling, other federal rescheduling, or legalization? Thank you.
So that's a good question, because it's important to know that rescheduling does not legalize the industry that as we know it today. Rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, whatever, anything in the Controlled Substances Act list of scheduled drugs can only be dispensed through pharmacies. FDA approved. They're subject to the FDA approval process, which is a multi-million-dollar process, and then can only be dispensed to patients who have had prescriptions for the product, and then dispensed through pharmacies. That's not what's happening. Most people now, half the states almost have adult use cannabis, so cannabis is being sold legally to anyone over 21. Even the medical states, these aren't FDA approved products, and they're not going to be. So it's important to know that rescheduling does not solve all of the industry's problems, but it would be a step in the right direction. Moving it to 3 or lower would remove 280E, which would be a boon for the industry. And I think that it's a step toward descheduling, and that's what NCIA has always advocated for, which is removing cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act altogether, and then creating another federal regulatory framework for cannabis that's more comparable to, say, alcohol, so that it's a legal but controlled product. But I'd be very surprised if we go from where we're at now to just descheduling and regulating. It seems unlikely, but it could happen. I think that rescheduling is a step toward that. And then once that happens, politically, it's easier. Well, we did this and the sky didn't fall. It's easier to go a little bit further.
And an interesting twist or wrinkle was added this week, right? With one of the bills regarding the hemp bill now adding a year to sunset, right? So that's we were wondering how they were going to attempt to put Pandora, cram her back into a very, very fine box that she had been in for very many decades, and has very much exploded to the point where not only is the taxation a problem, but I've got Total Wines and More and Bevmo selling THC drinks, and they're selling them for much cheaper than I have at my dispensary, and that's the market and what the market wants. So now that that is going to be reeled back in, we were curious how they were going to do that, and even a year is going to be challenging to wind down something like that. So how do you view that? I know that I didn't include this in the question. However, it's a litmus for where, the boat is steering, or at least headed in directions now at this. So what were your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, this is controversial within the industry. My position is, um, it's nuanced, but I really believe that this hemp legalization needs to be, it was probably done by accident from Congress and the Farm Bill. They made hemp legal, and then that ended up leading to THC products derived from hemp that are now federally legal, and there's a lack of parity between the states, the state regulated license system, and this much less, if at all, regulated hemp system or hemp products. But I think that we need to use this as an opportunity. Congress essentially legalized THC. Let's go back and regulate it so that there's parity, and then there should be federal regulations on these hemp products, not not just go back to prohibition. And so I was, very concerned that we were going to see this roll back to prohibition and just outlaw these products outright again. And so putting the 1 year kind of time freeze on it, I think gives us opportunity to negotiate for regulations instead of prohibition, so these products can continue. And while I know that it's certainly frustrating for the state licensed operators to have these hemp products out there. Ultimately, having THC beverages in the total wine is a very good thing for the cannabis industry. It's providing access to a safer product to people that would probably never walk into a dispensary. A lot of people that are going to go to a liquor store, a grocery store, that probably wouldn't think to go into a dispensary because they're not regular consumers, are now exposed to low dose cannabis products, at least in some states, that they can choose instead of the much more dangerous alcohol product, on the shelf right next door. And I think that ultimately that will be more consumers, is better for public health, is certainly as long as it means alcohol is continuing to go down. But I think it's be good for the industry too, because ultimately that new consumer base will go into the licensed market as they look for other products, right? So I think that's I spent some time in Minnesota where you can go to a brewery and you get beer or cannabis right in the same place. It's amazing. And so I think that is probably the future. We do need to provide more parity between the two sides of the industry, and I think what that means is less taxes and regulations on the licensed marijuana side, and more taxes and regulations on the hemp side, and to bring that parity. But I definitely opposed any efforts to prohibit.
No, I agree, and this is something I have had to balance the road. Of course, as being one of the oldest dispensaries in the country, and I've watched SKUs and everything come down, average sales come down. But I'm also for complete legalization. I want to see access, and I am very happy to see it in BevMo. I'm happy to see it.
Mhm.
As a business owner, it sucks. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
However, as a policy, I completely agree, is that it's given easy entry points for the average consumer to try something that is also along the lines of what they like, which is beer, something low in THC that they can handle, that they can relax. And I think one of the most important things is people, and especially Gen Z has responded so, is that they're very happy to no longer have hangovers. And by no longer having these hangovers, they can perform and not lose a day or two a week because they binge drink, and they're getting back another day of their lives, and they're realizing, hey, this isn't so bad. So yeah, I balance, and I think you're carrying a very a strong message in a very challenging time as we balance both sides because, I was there when the hemp separated itself from marijuana. So it's very interesting to
Yeah.
watch the divorce turn back into a secondary marriage.
Yes.
Convenience, right? Just to put a, kind of a bow on that. So
Yeah, I mean, and it's amazing. I mean, you have places that where cannabis is effectively legal through hemp that because, like, well, Texas is an example, right? I mean, that we just saw the veto of the legislation that was seeking to prohibit these products there. So cannabis is effectively legal in Texas right now. Needs to be regulated. That's the problem. It's not regulated, but that's a good thing. I mean, that's a lot of Americans that have access now to a product that Texas wasn't going to make marijuana legal, but they're able to make hemp legal. So I'm for it, and I think that and I understand why business owners are frustrated about this, but I think in the long run this is going to be good for the industry and is a way to get this product out there. And also, it's good to remember that we've always said regulate like alcohol. And the way that cannabis is currently regulated is not like alcohol. It's regulated like methadone or plutonium. The alcohol doesn't have to be sold through these alcohol only shops with cameras everywhere and armed guards and where you have to show your ID several times and you can't even a minor can't even walk in. That's not how alcohol is being sold at the grocery store. And so I think, ultimately, maybe this is controversial, but ultimately, I think cannabis should be sold at the grocery store as well.
I don't. It's not controversial at all. I've talked about it on Hash Church. I've talked about
Well,
it
not
here.
on this call, maybe, but I think
Well, it. Well, here, let me clarify for the audience: is that we, the original dispensary folk, we never expected to be around forever. We expected to be a stopgap until what you're seeing
Thank you. Thank
transpires.
you. Yes.
We expected it to be just like alcohol being sold at different rates and ranges at your 7-Eleven, right? So we're here for a limited time only, and I'm proud of that limited time only because that means that we did our job, that we're not around here forever. And I know a bunch of people got into this thinking, oh, it's the fucking whiny 49ers day. I'm going to make a whole bunch of money in cannabis. And they realized quite quickly that's not the reality that they're soaking in 2025, except in a few states, don't get me wrong, but the majority of the 10th Amendments, we've not gotten this correct yet. And we definitely need help and guidance on the federal level because what Aaron was talking about is what I talked about before we went on air, is that here in Berkeley, I already was dealing with a 34% tax rate, and the city of Berkeley just re-upped another 5%. And then on top of that, then the state went up another 4%. So there's another 9% tax that just in my city alone, which will cause people to go to other cities to purchase. So that's the reality and the frustration that, when you're being taxed over 40% in the city of Berkeley, and there's a city 2 miles to the left or 1 mile to the right, people will vote with their dollars and they're going to vote locally and regionally. Unfortunately, we have a loyal following. However, not many dispensaries across the United States do. And this is where it definitely favors the large scale MSOs as opposed to the mom and pop shop. So don't forget to support your mom and pop shops. You know what I'm saying? But when it goes global, don't forget your Costco ounces and all your different grades. It'll be available there too. And it better be good, is all I'm saying, because I get some amazing stuff at Costco for regular products. So I would anticipate we're going to get some amazing cannabis there too in the future. Right? Don't get me wrong. I expect some Walmart mids. Don't get me wrong. However, I do expect some, decently run nice stuff in the future. So, with that in mind, Mike Krause unfortunately went to ask his question, and electricity went out due to lightning striking near him. He is back with us, and so I've given him our final question of the night. So, Aaron, please put on your prognosticating hat, and after 15 years of doing this, we're going to ask you to look into the future. So, Michael Krawitz, you're recognized.
Thanks, Etienne. And I'll preface this question with just saying this, that a lot of the people, it seems, as we're looking out across the country, are focused on what's going to happen when state to state barriers are removed, through a federal, descheduling or whatever that might be coming down the pipeline eventually, or hopefully sooner than later. But we're actually pretty interested, and I'm personally very interested in the next step after that, which is country to country trade issues and how that unfolds. So anyway, that's kind of a preface to what we're seeing, and as we're just beginning to look into the future. But the question is, if you were to look 15 years in the future, where do you hope the cannabis industry will be, and what role do you envision NCIA and veterans community playing in getting us there?
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. Is I think we're actually on track to really, and I hope in 15 years it'll truly be more like alcohol, where these products, there's probably beverages are going to play a big role in it, because that's it's very comparable, obviously, to alcohol. But I think what I mean by that is that adults across the country be able to access THC products through regulated but normally regulated systems, not this current system that we have today, and that you will have interstate and international commerce. I think you're probably going to see a lot of cannabis coming in from Mexico for extraction, and the Walmart mids that Etienne predicted. And but then you're also going to see California and Oregon, and these places that have been growing amazing cannabis for generations, being able to export across the country and the world, and having interstate and international commerce in this product, and just have it be normalized. I think alcohol use will probably continue to decline as cannabis becomes a better alternative, and it will have a 50 state program. So that's my I really do think that we'll get there, because we're at 70 something percent support for legalization right now. It's just a matter of time that translates into that policy shift that we need.
So do you see it on a policy level by enough politicians finally passing legislation that or do you see it as a possible court case in the future that forces a change, i.e. what happened in Canada, right? You saw a whole bunch of lawsuits against combined into one that changed the actual based off the Constitution there, right? So there are different legal routes, right? We could even go a constitutional challenge. We investigated that. We have two routes. The problem is that it takes a solid decade, right? And on top of that, millions of dollars and lots of lawyers. So what way do you see the change happening? Do you see it as strictly legislative, or do you see some sort of politician as a president, possibly charismatically changing it? We've seen, Trump dangle it from time to time with no actual bite, so we've treating it that way. But is there a brave enough politician in the future or coming through the ranks currently that you see leading this issue? Because I don't see them currently within the cannabis caucus at this time, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, the issue at this time is there's so many competing priorities, and there always will be. But that's I think why we're not seeing a lot of action in Congress, because they've just had their big beautiful bill that was the president's priority. So I think we're going to see more cannabis legislation in Congress swirling around soon. But I think what's going to happen is probably a combination of both of the things you said there. One would be, first, we're going to see rescheduling. I think that would be my prediction, and hopefully that's within the year. That's all administrative and can happen with the stroke of a pen. Now, descheduling could happen with the stroke of a pen. I don't think it's likely, though. I think that's more likely to go through Congress. I think, and certainly the regulations that would, the federal regulatory framework would have to go through Congress. That wouldn't be just, one president couldn't just come up with that overnight. And so I think we're going to see an incremental approach. Probably going to see a Veterans Access bill passed, and rescheduling. That doesn't solve all the problems, but that builds momentum towards then things like safe banking, so the banking issue gets addressed, and then from there to descheduling and regulation. And it's an incremental approach.
Yeah, a lot of people want, and they think it's all going to happen in one fell swoop. And it's a constant reminder that we didn't lose all of our rights all at once. We're not going to get them all back at once. And
Right.
once people understand that perspective, it helps. It's kind of like the same thing about activism. They think activism is, Normandy storming the beach, every day, when it's a long, slow, starting off at a walk and you're doing a marathon, right? And you can't storm the beach every day or you're just going to be exhausted. So it's just, again, strategies. Mike, you have some follow-up.
Yeah, hey Aaron, I was just thinking about something. You mentioned and it happens like it's just DC, it's the Beltway, and there's other priorities, right? Like the big beautiful bill and all that other stuff, and everybody's busy and everything else. But it does have me wondering, like, how many people, do talk about cannabis and just talk about it. Representatives, congressmen, people, just discuss it in general. Talk about either smoking it or, different types of cannabis or, we're cannabis nerds. That's all we do is
Hmm.
that's all we do is talk about cannabis and, things like that. And, rosin and hash and, just whatever. Right. And, it is kind of, we're always trying to educate people, on things and stuff. And, we're pretty well, obviously educated in what we do. And it makes me wonder, how interested and how, educated they are, if that's something, if it gets on their mind, right, and gets people more thinking about, you know, the things like you were saying, hey, put a name to a face type of thing. Um, if that might maybe potentially stir up
Yeah.
things like you're saying in 10 to 15 years, this is where you want it to see it go.
Yeah, I mean, they're not talking about it, I think, like we are, but they, especially representatives in Congress that represent states that have an industry, they're all very familiarized with it. They're not deeply, but
and how much money there is to be made off of cannabis and that sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just that the issue is that there are so, they're generalists. So they're working, they're going to be maybe working on a cannabis issue, but then they're going to have to be focused on, some other foreign policy or whatever it is. And so there's so many competing priorities, but they are, it is being talked about at the highest levels, all the way up to the White House. And that's something that, should be encouraging because it used to be, when we started NCIA again, there was hardly anyone even willing to talk about it, much less, say that they supported it.
Well, I think that's going to wrap us up. Thank you
It's been a
very
pleasure.
Aaron, it is always an honor to spend time and space with you, as well as it's a honor to share mind space with you. You're always such a clear and concise leader. It's no wonder you've been able to lead the NCAA through very challenging times, especially COVID, which is an exceedingly challenging time for all of us. I would, of course, be remiss without thanking all of our VAC council members, Nate Landau, Michael Crowitz, Michael Davis, and myself, Etienne Fontan, and of course, our special guest, Aaron Smith. This has been our VAC Roundtable number 90. Aaron
Thank you.
Smith, you have a great rest of your day and weekend, everybody.
The Veterans Action Council is a Pace Radio Network content provider.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at Pace Radio.